National Signing Day is here, and this is our first video update. We're going to talk OU and their class, and joining me to talk about their signing day class is Brooke Pryor, OU beat writer. And Brooke, you had to get up early this morning to know who OU was signing. This was an early rising, early signing class. They started out ahead with a bunch of early enrollees, but who are they waiting on at this point?
At this point, we're not really waiting on anybody as far as guys that were previously announced. All those guys, I believe, K. Daly had tweeted at 6:40 that he was signing his letter of intent. Couldn't be faxed in until 7 a.m. here, but he was ready to go. So right now, the biggest guy that we're waiting on to hear is Marvin Wilson, five-star defensive tackle, picking between OU, LSU, Ohio State, Florida State, and USF this afternoon at about 3:30 local time.
All right, we'll
3:30 here.
And we'll talk about him in just a minute. But, by my count, it looked like with those 11 early signees, a dozen guys in this class were signed before 8 a.m. And then the rest of the class, or at least the rest of the expected class, had signed by 8:30. So, as you said, no surprises, everybody in on time. And, Brooke, maybe that kind of speaks to this class a little bit. This has been a long ballyhooed class that is expected to do great things. What can you sort of say about the overall makeup of this group of signees?
So they're ranked number 6 in Rivals team recruiting rankings. Obviously, that'll probably fluctuate back and forth throughout the day, but it's going to finish as a top 5 class, has a chance to sneak into going to finish as a top 10 class, has a chance to sneak into a top 5 class. It's really well-rounded, and I think the biggest thing from this, it's not just about these individual guys that have made these commitments, but it's really about this Sooner Squad 17 hashtag that has kind of been going around for a long time on Twitter. These guys have really been all in on the brotherhood aspect of it. I think more so than in other years, they're bonded. They really held each other accountable. If somebody was going on visits, they were still tweeting, hey, we still want all our members here. We still, we love each other. We're brothers, all of that. And so I think because of this bond that they had, A, you got those 11 early enrollees, and B, then you got all these other guys that came in later that were still committed despite other teams making late runs at them.
Yeah, and right now, again, depending on what happens the rest of the day, 18 by our count, 4-star guys, according to the recruiting rankings that are out there, which, Brooke, you speak about the sort of overarching theme of this class, that togetherness, but I think a lot of people are curious on an individual level, who could maybe come in and compete right away and possibly play as a true freshman. I mean, we saw just this last year, Caleb Kelly maybe got off to a little bit of a slow start, didn't play much early, but by the end of the year, a huge contributor at linebacker. Are there a couple names within this class that you feel like have a chance to be guys that will not only get on the field, but also provide some playing time and some important stats for the Sooners as this season in the fall comes up?
Well, I think the first name that jumps to mind is CeeDee Lamb. He's a wide receiver out of Texas. He had 33 touchdown receptions in his senior season, finished with over 2,000 yards. I want to say it was 2,032 yards, which was the 4th most in Texas history, Texas State high school football history. So he can just put up monster numbers. And there's an obvious void there with the departure of D.D. Westbrook. So I think look for him. I think we could see Robert Barnes as a guy, really highly rated safety. He's also the son of another former OU player, Reggie Barnes. So he's got, the will and the desire to kind of make his own name for himself here. So I would look for those guys. I think you could see one of the running backs, possibly Trey Sermon, running back out of Georgia, have a really big impact in his freshman year. Again, it's just those are the areas where there's been a departure. Running back, you're missing Samaje Perine, you're missing Joe Mixon. So there's a need there. They have some guys already on the team that have kind of proven in the past that they could be good, but I think that there's definitely going to be open competition there to see if one of those freshman running backs could come in and start as a freshman.
Yeah, and you mentioned that wide receiver position, looking for playmakers. Probably the best name in the class, Charleston Rambo, one of the wide receivers, which I found out earlier this morning, though, may not be the best name in the Big 12 among signing classes. I found a Maverick Wolfley, West Virginia's new fullback commitment. So, but that wide receiver position does look like a spot, Brooke, considering the pedigree of some of these receivers coming in, that those guys could potentially make a huge impact at that position.
Yeah, and there's also Marquise Brown. He's a junior college guy, so he's already been on campus, but he's from College of the Canyons. I think that he could have another opportunity in that D.D. Westbrook kind of makeup of a junior college guy who comes in a little bit more well-rounded, not as rough around the edges as some of the freshmen, who could end up having a big impact. But OU has a lot of really good wide receivers in this class, which they really needed. I mean, there are some playmakers still on the team. You have Jeff Mead and Mark Andrews, but they need one of those speedy guys, and I think any three of those wide receiver commits that we've been talking about could fill that void for them.
All right, we'll see how that shakes out in the fall. A couple guys that I want to talk about that were potential Sooners, but one already we know is not going to be a Sooner. That's Tyler Taylor. He's a linebacker from down in Georgia, and Oklahoma really pushed hard for him late, Brooke, but he announced earlier today that he was going to LSU. Did the Sooners have really much of a chance to get him, or how do you think this all shook out in the end?
So it seemed like there was an opportunity for the Sooners to get him. He put OU in his top three, so that seemed to be a positive sign. And then a couple days ago, he announced that Auburn and LSU were the two that he was choosing between. But I still don't think that necessarily disqualified OU. It's one of those things where, a kid says, well, I'm only going to choose between these two schools, but maybe, OU, from what we understand, still tried to keep in contact with him, was present. So in case he had a change of heart or anything else, could have potentially been a dark horse. Turned out they were not. Ed Orgeron at LSU scooped another linebacker away from OU after getting Jacob Phillips earlier this week and flipping him late in the process.
Yeah, definitely some big gets there for the Tigers and their new recently minted head coach. I guess he served that interim tag, did Ed Orgeron this last year. But Brooke, the last guy, you mentioned him a little bit ago, but let's dive into to him a little bit more, that being Marvin Wilson, a defensive tackle. And he's big and big time, a guy from the Houston area. What's the situation with him, and where did the Sooners stand on his list?
Well, the Sooners would love to have Big Marv on their team. He's a five-star guy. He would be the only Rivals five-star commit in this class should he choose OU. But it kind of seems like he's down between LSU and Florida State, although there's also the possibility Ohio State could come in there and Oklahoma could come in there late. He tweeted last night, as, to add some signing day drama to all of this, tweeted about 11 o'clock that he was having second thoughts. We don't know if that's about, girl troubles, high school homework, whatever. Maybe it's about recruiting. There's really no way to tell. But tweeted that he was having some second thoughts. So that will be something to watch. He's announcing this afternoon, 3:30 Central Time on ESPN2. Who knows if he will do anything crazy. I saw a kid a couple minutes ago on ESPN do the old shirt trick. Looked like he was committing to Florida, and then 3 shirts under that turned out he was really committing to USC. So who knows what Big Marv will do, Hollywood Marv. I'm excited to see what kind of thing he has cooked up.
Yeah, he's, according to what we've heard, he's one of the last really top-level recruits, top 10 national-type recruits out there yet to decide. So we'll see again this afternoon on ESPN2. He'll announce. The Sooners will have their press conference about signing day. Bob Stoops addressing the media and questions about this signing class at 2 p.m. Be sure to join us on News OK for that coverage. And stay with us throughout the day. We'll have Oklahoma State's press conference here in a little bit at 9 o'clock with Mike Gundy. Then we'll be back in studio at 10 o'clock to talk about Oklahoma State's signing class with OSU beat writer Kyle Fredrickson. And be sure to stay with the best coverage team anywhere at newsok.com and every day in the Oklahoman.
they're on a battle right now. I think they'll get it figured out. The coaches should do it. Yeah, no, they. That's what I say. I'll turn all over that road.
You guys ready? Everybody ready? Obviously, we're very excited about another class. We've addressed our needs. We've got another scholarship left over in case we pick somebody up before August. But as you guys have seen the list, we had the majority of high school players, and then we picked up a few big guys from two-year schools that we feel like could really address some issues right away for next year. But this is really a quality class. We've moved in the direction of trying to really secure cerebral football players, guys that we think can think and react really fast in the game. We tried to do as much research as we could in those areas. And as always, I'm very excited about these guys. We'll know a lot more about them in 2 years. But they're good young men. They come from quality people that understand the character and the structure and the accountability and the discipline that it takes to be successful here. And, it's interesting in recruiting. Over the last couple of years, I've noticed that sometimes we have young men visit here that find out what it takes to be a part of our team, and they end up not coming here because of that, which was good for everybody. You want young men to be here and understand the role that they play and the commitment that we have as coaches in the university to fulfilling their education and allowing them to be a part of a team and play for a championship. So I'll answer questions about any of them, but we're really, really excited about the guys that are in this class.
Mike, the skills overall look really good. Talk about, if you can, the two running backs, because I think J.D. King played for a state championship. A lot of people saw him. And Chuba is just a special athlete all the way around.
The could be the most interesting position for us in a year. We'll see where they're at. Obviously, Chuba has world-class speed. There's been some conversation that maybe in 4 years he could be running in the Olympics, whether that's right or wrong, either way. But I kind of go back to what Coach Jones used to say: when you get to a certain point, you're really fast. He's really fast. But what's interesting is when he was here on his visit, he weighed 196 pounds, and he broke a bone, cracked a bone in his leg in his last game of the year, so he hasn't been able to train, and he still weighed 196 pounds. So what's interesting about him is could potentially weigh 215 easy, maybe 220, and he's already run a 10.5. So a special athlete. And then with King, we had him committed for a long time. I was concerned a little bit with the distance. But when he came back on his visit with his mom, I had a good conversation with her. And she said from day one when he visited here in the spring, he called her after he was on campus for about 2 hours and said, "Mom, I'm going to Oklahoma State." And she said, "What?" And he said, "I've just never felt this way. I feel like it's home, and I'm going to Oklahoma State." And so we were able to hang on to him. But he's another young man that's already over 200 pounds. I think he was 207 on his visit. So potentially two backs that are very skilled, had a lot of success. They've been durable, and could be 215, 220 pounders.
You mentioned Chuba had the broken bone in his last game. He played on it. I mean, does
Yeah,
that give
and
him
again,
any extra credit?
right, I don't know if it was broken or cracked or either way, but they set him for 6 weeks afterwards. He went ahead and finished the game, that's right.
When you say cerebral football players, Mike, what are you referring to, and what do you see as being the big benefit in that?
Well, as you guys know, the game's changed considerably, and especially in this league. Teams are playing with 3 and 4 people split out of the backfield. They're moving them across. They're faking a handoff. They're faking a toss. They're throwing a pass. And maybe more so on defense than any, in our opinion, you have to be able to think really fast. I have a gap responsibility, I have a coverage responsibility, and then I have a play pass responsibility, all while two guys are moving on the snap of the ball that could potentially change my gap responsibility. And so each year we evaluate what we think we've done positive and things we need to improve in all areas. And over the last couple of years, and particularly this year, we feel like that players that are able to think really fast and react, football savvy, could be more beneficial to our program than ever before. So I guess what I'm saying is, if the prototype at a certain position is 6'2" and you're only 6 foot and a half, and you need to be 225 and you're only 215, and you need to run a 4.7 and you run a 4.85, if we think you're a cerebral player and you can get there faster, we're probably going to take you instead of the other guy.
As you evaluate that aspect, is that just talking to coaches, high school coaches, your observations? How much of that also is classroom work and stuff like that? Does it all go together?
It ties in some to the classroom, and being an employee of a public education or university, I'd like to say it's 100%, but it's not 100%. We all know we've had buddies that weren't fired up about school, but they were terrific on the field, and vice versa. So it's a little bit of everything, but we tried to be as detailed and as in-depth this year as ever in information about players, background checks. That's kind of the new fad, and try to reach as deep as possible into that, and that's not foolproof. Sometimes you don't get all that information. But even asking questions, more detail on the staff, the coaching staff, about certain things that they did at their particular position, and got their honest opinion on how they felt about them if we were trying to grade them from 1 to 10 on being a very savvy, cerebral football player and not just an athletic player that so-called had potential.
Coach, you mentioned a couple of times throughout the season with social media affecting kids' kind of awareness and retention of information. Going through this recruiting process, was there anything you learned new about even younger kids and what they're kind of dealing with how they process, your sales pitch to them?
Well, honestly, I find out after the fact. I get it from my 12-year-old. This morning early, he was calling me on his way to school, telling me who had signed. He knew it before I did, and he was on Instagram. Somehow he was getting it on Instagram before I was getting it. So what I found out is the technology is increasing every day, and it wasn't as out of control this recruiting year as what I thought it would be. It's almost settled down to a certain extent. We've not ever really been big fans of the recruiting taking place on Twitter, but I think it's settled down a little bit. But there is instant information out there, and a year ago I would have said that over half of it was false, and I'm going to say now that 75% of it is true. It's more accurate than it's ever been, and I think that's because it's coming from the source.
Like this, sort of evaluating how cerebral guys are, is that something you did more in this cycle than you have in years past?
Much more. We started it last year and we liked where it was, and then we felt really good about it, and so we pushed harder on this class than ever about trying to bring in young men that fit the prototype, maybe a little bit more cerebral player and may not be as fast or as tall.
Having a coaching staff that's been with you now almost or 2 years. How did that positively influence this recruiting process?
It makes a big difference. You impact your recruiting classes impact when you lose a coach, either before or right after the bowl game, and then even worse if you lose one a week or two before signing day. It creates some doubt, and allows the other teams to come in and take shots at you. At times you can defend it off, and sometimes you can't. So it makes it much easier. These guys held for the most part. As I said, we had a couple guys. We had 2 guys a month or so ago, month and a half ago, that went to other places. But for the most part, we held everybody. And really, we held everybody except with the ones that come in that really see how things operate in our program, and maybe it's not for them.
You've always said you'd rather not recruit a quarterback your height or smaller because of your experience. I'd say you kind of upheld that with the quarterback in this class. You got to look up to him.
Yeah, he's a big man. He's on campus now. Jelani's is here, and he had a great year. I think they started out 2-3, or 1-2. I can't remember. Then they ran the table and he won a state championship. So we're excited about him. He's in the program. A lot of substance to him. Comes from a good mom and daddy. They understand commitment and the structure and discipline that we look for. It'll be really interesting to see how he develops. We'll have an interesting spring because Mason, we won't work him a lot. We'll work the younger guys, and so as we have our 3 or 4 thud scrimmages in the spring, the majority of it will be these young quarterbacks, and we'll let them play.
I know the flights are one thing, but have you found that the novelty of Stillwater is kind of increasing year to year in terms of a recruiting tool?
The flights are a big plus for us. Population's growing here. We're at almost 55,000, and enrollment's up to 21,000. So the growth, economic growth east of the community, all those things have helped us some. But we still get young men to come here who have, or I should say, are very serious about getting an education, being part of the team, making friends for life, and competing for a championship. Those are the ones that come to school here. And we don't try to hide that. Years ago, we used to try to make Stillwater something that it wasn't. And I say this to the parents and to the young men. We don't have nightclubs that stay open until 4 a.m. here. So if you're looking for that type of lifestyle, then you need to go somewhere else because you'll be disappointed when you get here. Our best recruiters have been our current team, the guys that are on our team right now, because we've been here long enough that they can tell the young men that visit our campus whatever they tell you is the truth. It's the way it is. We're very transparent. We're very upfront. We don't hide anything. We tell them exactly the way it's going to be. That way when they get here, you don't have any disgruntled players in the organization. Everybody understands the direction we're going. And we've done that now for years, and it works for us.
I thought it was interesting. You might get John Smith out there to watch some of your kids in this class because Fualelua, the Snow kid from Utah, Malcolm Rodriguez, and especially Brock Martin, all have won or will win more individual wrestling championships.
Sure. And Brandon Evers was a good wrestler. He's a good one. So I'm excited about the class of from Oklahoma. I've said this for the last couple of years, and I'll say it again this year. The talent in the state of Oklahoma is getting better and better each year. And with the budget cuts and the education cuts that we have in this state, I'm not sure how that's happening because there's been cuts all across the board. The coaches are cut, teaching's cut. I'm a big proponent of doing whatever it takes to make education and fund education in this state. But it's not happened, and for whatever reason, the talent's just gotten better and better. And we have a number of young men from Oklahoma that are in this group that fit the criteria that we started this conversation with today. And as you guys know, I'm a big fan of wrestlers, a sport that takes discipline, accountability, structure, and when you're out there on the mat, you can't look and blame anybody else. You're on your own. And that's why I like those guys. But when you look at the guys that we have, you talked about Evers, and you have Brock, and you have Odom, Rodriguez, and had one other one, I think. Is that it? I thought we had 4. Yeah.
Evers, Martin, Rodriguez, and Odom.
Yeah, we got 4. Okay, so when you talk about those guys, they kind of fit what we talked about earlier, and we're excited about those guys, and it's important to them. You know, they're from right around here, and there's no question that the geological location of the players makes a huge impact on your program.
Coach, you got a Garvin County kid in Odom. Is that your first time signing somebody from that neck of the woods?
I don't know what all cities are in Garvin County, but I know that I've heard it on the weather when there's tornado warnings. So we're excited about what Barron brings. He got in really late. We had an opening. He's a 4-sport athlete. He's 6'4.5", 222 pounds, 4 sports. So hadn't really had a chance to grow and develop. We look for him to be 250 in a year and a half, and play that role that Blake Jarwin played for us. And it's nice for us to be able to say we had a spot open. Wow, let's take an Oklahoma kid. We got one sitting right there. And when I talked to him on the phone, I wanted to make it clear to him that no matter if you're with us for a year or a day, on signing day, in the end, it's all the same. And I use the example of Marcus Keys that we took at 11 o'clock at night before signing day a couple years ago, and he started all 13 games this year at left guard for us as I think a redshirt freshman. And he was the last guy we took in the class. And so not that Barron needed to hear that, but I told him that's what happened to Marcus Keys. So we're excited that he's a part, and he's an Oklahoma kid.
Being from Class A, obviously also Seton was from Class A. Is it more difficult to find talent down there because they're not getting maybe the notoriety or playing as much talent as guys from Tulsa and Oklahoma City?
It's harder to evaluate. There's not as much size and speed in some of your smaller schools because of the population. There's not as many numbers to pick from. So what you're saying is right. It is more difficult, in our opinion, to evaluate. And there are more players that come from those schools that get missed on because sometimes coaches fall into a routine of how to evaluate, and it is more difficult. That's where the mistakes are made, in my opinion. We try to go the other direction, but we're not perfect either. Recruiting obviously is not a perfect science. Well, for example, we had our last 5 classes, 16, 15, 14, 13, and 12. Our average rating from one of the bigger recruiting services was 36th in the country. And if you take those 5 classes, which whatever this class is rated, we won't know much about it until 2 years from now. I mean, you're not going to know anything about these guys next year. 2 years from now, 3 years from now, and 4 years from now, you can kind of evaluate this class and say, okay, either we were right or wrong. Well, if you go back the last 5 years, it's fair to say in 14, 13, and 12, that we can somewhat evaluate those classes now based on the success we've had. We won 21 games in 2 years, and we were ranked average 36 in the country during those 5 years. So there's one of two things happening. Either we're damn good evaluators and the recruiting services don't know what they're talking about, or we're damn good coaches. One or the other. I don't know which one it is. But we're not changing what we do.
You know, I was going to ask you that because I've been trying to get through to Tom Luganville from ESPN, who I think's pretty good at what he does. And there's a lot of people that rank recruits, but along the lines of what you just said there, with an average ranking in the mid-30s, what is it that causes this program to overachieve? And maybe Rob Glass is in that equation. I mean, what is it?
Well, I had to ask 2 days ago because I figured that somebody would ask what about a rating or something, and I wanted to speak intelligently because I didn't know because I've never looked at it. I shouldn't say that. I haven't looked at it during recruiting. Sometimes I look at it afterwards just to kind of see where people fall. And I looked the other day. Well, I don't want to bring up another school, but anyway, I make comparisons at times based on things to try to supplement our research to make us better. And honestly, it's one of the two things that I mentioned, or what you talked about with Rob Glass, and that falls into what we do here. And I think he's the best in the country at what he does, period. We bring guys in, and in 2 years we develop them, and you know, they go from 18% body fat to 9% body fat, and they'll put on 15 pounds, and they go from a 4.8 to a 4.65. But more importantly, he instills discipline, structure, and toughness in them that really equates to who we are on game day and why we've been able to have as much success as we have on the field and in the classroom. And it was like a year ago, we have our APR, the annual retention rate, that's kind of the new grading scale for us as far as academics. You don't hear as much about graduation rate anymore. You hear about APR. Well, we were 1,000 last year. So there's something going on that's working in the right direction.
Which do you think it is, Mike? Damn good evaluator or damn good coach?
Honestly, I thought about it, and I thought, well, I didn't want to say it because I just opened myself up to all my buddies on sports radio taking shots at me, but I figured, what the hell? I mean, that'll at least give them something to talk about other than Trump for a while, So it's one of two, Barry. You've been around a long time. Either recruiting services don't give us credit, we're good evaluators, or we're good coaches.
But I'm serious.
I don't know. I mean,
in other words, it'd be a deal where you get a guy in here and pretty early when he's here, you think, man, he's really good. We're glad we got him. Or you coach him up, and in 3 years,
little of both. Sometimes you're like, yeah, I don't know if we hit on that one. But, and I hate to make these comparisons because it makes me look bad, but it's, sometimes when you're in college and you're dating a girl and you're all fired up and you go out with her and you sit there at the restaurant and, there's something, she smacks or something or does something to irritate you, and 15 minutes later you're like, oof, this is not good. And it's like, that's Debbie Downer, So you start trying to figure out how to get out of it and go home. Well, in recruiting, every player that we bring in here deserves a coach that believes in that player. And what we try to do, Barry, is we try to not evaluate a young man until he's been in our program for 24 months. And he's had a chance to grow up. He's had a chance to develop. He's had a chance to be in the weight room with Rob Glass. And then he has to start making some strides. But this is not the NFL, and you can't put it on Plan B. Is Plan B still active in the NFL? I don't even, that may be gone. Whatever. You can't trade them. They're here forever.
From the Oklahoma newsroom, it's a signing day update. Oklahoma State now our focus in this upcoming 10 o'clock hour, and Kyle Fredrickson, our Oklahoma State beat writer, joins us on the phone. Kyle, it appears that OSU has everyone in. No real surprises today. They weren't really targeting anybody that was a last-minute decision. What's your overall thought about this signing day for the Cowboys in this class that they have coming in?
Yeah, thankfully the most drama it seems that they have on signing day today is the fact that Mike Gundy showed up to his press conference without a mullet. That was I think that was the biggest decommitment we've seen from anyone right now with this class in terms of hairstyle. But no, this has been a day that I think OSU is looked forward to. Mike Gundy's talked recently about how with the continuity of this staff, bringing the same recruiters back for consecutive seasons, something they hadn't done in a long, long time, that allowed them to really recruit some players that they got in on as juniors, continuing that relationship through 2 full recruiting cycles and all culminating into today. So in terms of the rankings of what these guys are individually and then collectively with some of these recruiting services, it's going to be a class that's going to finish probably in the mid-30s nationally by most of those recruiting services. But, as Gundy has said over these, now 13 seasons that he's had where he's brought these players in, they're not overly concerned with necessarily what these guys are ranked individually, just more impressed by what they're able to do athletically. A lot of them playing multiple sports, a lot of them, being under-recruited stars at their schools in a lot of these Texas areas. So for Gundy and the Cowboys, I know this is a day they've been looking forward to, and they've built some what looks like some good depth moving forward.
Yeah, just to clarify, by the way, Mike Gundy said he cut about 3 inches off the mullet, so I think he may still technically have the mullet, but it's definitely shortened down from what we saw at the end of last season. He was a little worried about going into homes for home visits during the recruiting push here with it looking a little bit scraggly. So Mike Gundy has cut the mullet back just a hair, no pun intended. All right, Kyle, one of the more juicy items that came out of Mike Gundy's press conference and talking about this signing class is that they have 1 scholarship left. Any idea where they might look to try to use that scholarship?
Yeah, it's interesting that he says that today because it's sort of an all call to, I think, players, mostly I would guess in-state players who are sort of waiting for a scholarship offer. Maybe things fell through, maybe last minute decisions had to be made, and now they're looking for a new opportunity. For Gundy to announce that today, we've got 1 more left. And in terms of the needs of OSU and what this class brings already, I would certainly think that OSU is going to take a long, hard look at who they might be able to get as an offensive lineman with that scholarship. Through the course of this class, OSU's had 3 different high school guys commit and then decommit, 2 of them going to Texas A&M and the other going to Texas, leaving OSU with a bit of a hole in terms of its long-term development on the offensive line. They pick up a JUCO guy in this class. They pick up in Arlington Hambright. They pick up the Minnesota center transfer and Tyler Moore, who's going to have to sit out a year before he gets to play. So they like the pieces that they've added, but in terms of developing it for, down the line at 2019 and 2020, that's where they're really looking ahead. I think it may be filling that last spot.
Yeah, definitely something we'll keep an eye on to see who might fill that last scholarship spot, some local guys that could fall into that. So we'll continue to follow that in the coming days and weeks. But Kyle, you talk about offensive line maybe being a position that this recruiting class could be improved by with an addition. What are some position groups or even some individuals that you feel like when you look at this recruiting class could be the quickest to make an impact? Any guys that you see playing right away as true freshmen, a la Justice Hill from this last season?
Yeah, what's sort of fascinating about that is, in terms of the guys that they think will probably make an immediate impact, they come at position groups where the Cowboys are pretty set, but so it's be interesting to see how it plays out through fall camp, whether these young guys can make enough of an impression, kind of a la James Washington a couple years at receiver, kind of becoming an instant star. The Cowboys have a couple of those guys with that potential. The first being Tylan Wallace. He's the brother of Trayson Wallace, the exact twins from Fort Worth South Hills. He's one of the highest rated receivers the Cowboys have had, dating back all the way to Des Bryant, a player who's got length and athleticism, who, if he isn't necessarily a starter next year with how deep OSU is at receiver, he should be a guy that should see the field. And if he develops a rapport with Mason Rudolph and becomes, a reliable target, then we could be looking at a potential Justice Hill situation. A lot to play out there. But also the second guy who could also play as soon as that first game is a running back, kind of in that mold of Justice Hill. The Cowboys selected a guy with world-class speed in Chuba Hubbard from up in Alberta, Canada. It's sort of yet to be seen whether or not the play of Canadian football will translate immediately in terms of the competition that he faced up in Canada. What he's going to face in the States is going to be much tougher. So you wonder if there's going to be a little bit of, a growing pains when it comes to that. But when you got a guy with that type of speed who's been a physical runner as well, with a big frame, I think they're going to try to find ways to use him in tandem with Justice Hill, considering the departure of Chris Carson after this past season.
You mentioned Hubbard, Kyle. He's a trackster, a guy that is expected to at least think about running track at Oklahoma State, and that was actually the idea of these guys within this recruiting class for Oklahoma State playing other sports, doing other things besides just football was something we heard in a variety of ways from Mike Gundy. It seems like that's something that when Oklahoma State's out on the recruiting trail, obviously they want great football players, but it sounds like that is really something when they're out evaluating these guys that they like to see these guys that they're going to sign on signing day be multi-sport athletes and not do the one sport like we hear so many times, that specialization that's out there. What's that trend for you in your mind? Is Oklahoma State different than other people, or is this something that they value maybe a little differently than some other schools?
Oh, I think it's just sort of a reflection of where they're putting their most recruiting efforts, because there's going to be the 5-star kids and the 4-star kids in the Dallas Metroplex areas where the Cowboys have had success recruiting before, where they're going to offer those kids, they're going to pursue them. But with the understanding that when you got, Alabamas and Florida States and national programs, storied programs from across the country getting in on their recruitment, like OSU coach Mike Gundy said, back in December, they felt like they were at the bar and the lights were coming on and they were going home alone after spending all this time trying to basically court these recruits. So when you look at all these multi-sport, multi-position guys on the roster, it's a reflection of where the Cowboys are emphasizing. They want to go out and get the best players on the field, guys who are sort of natural leaders because they have to play so many different positions or sports. Time management, they sort of come in, I think, a little more chiseled mentally than maybe some of these other guys who are only playing one sport and recruited in one area. And they're typically those 3-star athletes that the Cowboys have really built this program on, and some of their best players started in that mold. So, they love to really rely on Rob Glass and tout his ability to develop players. So when you guys who come in to the program have so many intangibles like that, they really like their ability to turn them into the athletes that they project to become.
Hey, lastly, Kyle, tell us where you are today. We've been talking about Mike Gundy's press conference, but because I'm here in the studio and you're actually not in Stillwater either, where are you today? Who are you going to see?
Right now, I'm in Oologah to see Brock Martin, the defensive end for the Cowboys who committed. Later, I'll be going to Bixby to see Brendan Evers, who's a defensive tackle commit. So I had to do a little bit of driving this morning, but it'll be nice to sort of see these kids and to kind of see just the emotion of this day, because when they look back on their football careers and just their life in general, this is going to be a time that they'll always remember, kind of making it official, having someone else pay for your college to play a college sport. It's a pretty exciting time for anybody.
Definitely so. We've got reporters like Kyle spread out all over the metro, all over the state. We'll have that coverage throughout the day at newsok.com and tomorrow in the Oklahoman, but we'll continue to have online coverage today. We've got a rolling online chat going right now with some of our writers. So get in there, ask your questions. They'll answer when it's their time to get on the chat. We'll continue to also have live video. Our 11:30 time slot, we'll have high school sports writer Scott Wright talking about some of the in-state recruits. So we'll have wall-to-wall coverage continuing as signing day does as well. Be sure to stay with the best coverage team anywhere at newsok.com and every day in the Oklahoman. Newsroom, this is a signing day update. I'm Jenny Carlson here in the studio, joined by our high school sports writer, Scott Wright. And Scott, let's talk about the guys around the state who have signed their national letters of intent. But actually, let's start with two guys that didn't sign today, guys that were pretty highly regarded this past season, one from McGuinness, one from Norman North. Tell us about these guys and why signing day wasn't a day that they signed.
Well, I was out at Norman North this morning. They had all of their signings at 8 a.m., and everybody was kind of curious if Brandon Marquette, their quarterback, was going to sign. He did not. It's really surprising. There's always a guy or two in every class. Those of us who cover high school football closely are just baffled by the recruiting process. And there are always the success stories later of the guy that had to walk on and ends up playing in the NFL and things like that, but or go to JUCO, whatever it might be. But I saw Brandon Marquette play 5 or 6 times. I lost count, honestly, how many times I saw him play this year. And we're talking about 6A competition, played Tulsa Union twice. He's playing against Division I level defensive backs and defenses. And he had statistically the best passing season in the history of 6A football. It was the number 2 yardage-wise, the second most yards a quarterback had thrown for in any class, over 4,600 yards, 48 touchdowns, led Norman North to the state championship game where they lost to Union. He's only 6 feet tall. I get that, but he's got the mind, he's got the arm. The fact that he goes unsigned was really surprising leading up to signing day. The fact that we got here and he didn't sign today didn't necessarily surprise me, because I thought that he might wait and see what other options might come about. Somebody decommits or flips at the last second. Somebody ends up scrambling, needing a quarterback, and he can find a spot. He's also going to have his choice, basically. He'll have his choice if he doesn't get a scholarship of where he wants to go walk on at, because just about every college that they've contacted has said if they didn't have a scholarship, yes, he can absolutely come walk on here. So he'll have his choice to find a program that he fits into. And the second being Rubel Go at McGuinness. He's even more baffling because he is a 6'2", 200-pound receiver, defensive back. He can return kicks. Really is a guy who just makes football plays. He was competing at the 5A level against some of the best talent in the state. McGuinness makes the 5A championship game against Carl Albert. Just an overall very talented and gifted athlete. The knock on him is his speed and his kind of quick burst acceleration. They say he's not fast enough to be a slot receiver, not big enough to be an outside receiver. I might disagree a little bit on that one at 6'2" and 200 pounds, but I think he could be a great safety, which is a position on defenses at the college level that's becoming so much more important. But we'll see what happens with him. He's waiting to see what happens. He has a backup plan, and he in his mind is he's not looking forward to not playing football. But if it doesn't work out, he has a college plan in mind to go to OU or OSU, major in business, and go on with his life. So we'll see what happens from here on out. Signing day might be coming to an end pretty soon, but the football recruiting process is not over for either of these guys.
Well, and Scott, I think it probably bears mentioning that, even locally, Oklahoma State, Mike Gundy had his press conference earlier today announcing that they had left open a scholarship. They signed one less than they actually have scholarships for. So it's not out of the question that programs might have an option for one of these two guys to come in and play. And you talked about walk-on situations, but it's possible that a scholarship could potentially shake out for one or both of these guys before everything's said and done with.
Absolutely. There are so many things that happen, last-minute recruiting situations and things like that kids are still making decisions today or were flipped out of their commitment last night to a different school. A lot of things are still happening right now. A lot of wheels are still turning, and you don't know what might happen by the end of today or by this weekend as things shake out. You never know where that scholarship might pop up at.
Definitely so. We'll continue to follow that as those two guys, as Scott said, very highly regarded, very good seasons this last fall for their respective high school teams. So we'll see what happens to both of them. Scott, as we look more broadly at this class, we don't have the final numbers in yet, but it looks like this is going to be an extremely deep class, possibly over 40 Division I signees, and some interesting landing spots, if you will, for some of these guys. How do you sort of how do you wrap your head around this class? And now that signing day is here, to see the final decisions of all of these players, how do you sort of rate this group of recruits?
It's been a really interesting class to watch because this class really kind of had it all. You had some elite prospects at the top, 5 guys who were All-Americans in the big All-American games, Army and Under Armour and those. But then you had this depth that was just incredible. We're pushing 40, could get up to 50 depending on if you throw in some of the FCS guys and things like that. Really a chance to have a lot of guys out of this state going on to play Division I football next year. It's one of the deepest classes we've had in a while, and one of the best as far as the star power as well. Guys that you think have a chance to go in and be playmakers immediately, and be long-term players at their colleges. And like you said, there's been a lot of different colleges that don't often come here and recruit people that are coming in here either to recruit and a lot of times signing people. Arkansas, even though they're right next door, they hadn't signed anybody. They had 2 Oklahoma guys on their roster this year. Both were seniors. That was the last time they recruited anybody out of Oklahoma. They came in and got 3 this year. Memphis has at least 3. We'll see what happens at Southmore later today with Javarius Owens. He was committed to Memphis, could go back there, might go somewhere else, but they came in and grabbed 3, and they've had some success here lately. Arizona State got Evan Fields from Midwest City earlier this week. UCLA and Notre Dame and places like that were coming in to recruit him, and those are schools that just don't come around here a lot. Nebraska has been coming in here more under Mike Riley, and they came in and got DeAndre Thomas from Mustang. So some really interesting names popping up. San Diego State came in and grabbed a Tulsa Union receiver late, which was an interesting one. I don't know that I've ever heard their name pop up at all on the recruiting circles in Oklahoma. So really interesting. Obviously the internet has changed so much with kids getting their huddle links to their highlights on Twitter and sending it out, and you never know who it's gonna land on the phone or computer of. So it's really changing recruiting, and it's making it a lot of fun to see these kids get these various opportunities from parts of all around the country, or right here in Oklahoma, where we had 10 guys signed at OU or OSU, a bunch more at Tulsa. So. It was a really fun class to follow and watch how it was going to progress.
Yeah, that 10 for Oklahoma State combined is the first time there's been double digits since 2009, so speaks to the depth of the class that these 2 Power 5 programs would think highly enough of guys in the state. Lastly, before we let you go, Scott, maybe the surprises of the day were some guys that had Division I talent, beyond the guys that didn't sign that we talked about earlier, but Division I talent that ended up junior college signees instead. Top of my mind is Rowdy Warner out at Jones. What about some of those junior college options? And I mean, obviously those guys still have a chance to go Division I eventually, but some surprise there in your mind?
Yeah, a little bit. Rowdy Warner was definitely a surprise because Texas Tech had come in late and scooped him up, and it had been kind of quiet. Nobody really knew that NEO was in the picture there. I tell you what, NEO is doing such a great job. They've rebuilt that program. They'd fallen off there for a while. They've rebuilt that program now, and they've become so good at turning out Division I talent and getting them on to the next level. They've got a lot of guys out of this class that are heading on to the next level. So other JUCOs are coming in as well, but NEO is really the big focus, and they're doing a great job of getting these guys ready for the next level. So it's been really good to watch that program rebuild itself and be able to take guys to the next level who can't get to the D1 level right out of high school, to give them that second chance to move on.
All right, our signing day coverage continues. We'll have Bob Stoops' press conference from Norman later this afternoon, as well as more in-depth videos from our OU, OSU, and high school coverage team as we wrap up National Signing Day 2017. Be sure to stay with the best coverage team anywhere at newsok.com and every day in the Oklahoman.